got Dr. Abimbola Ogundare, who is an educationist. She joins us online as well. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, there were quite a number of people who were not comfortable with schools reopening, the graduating classes, as it were. But now that the minister has come up with this position, there are still those who think, wait a minute, are they on the same page with the presidential task force on COVID-19? But what is your impression first of that recent announcement?
Well, the thing is, obviously, there are various perspectives to that singular issue. There are the children who really do want to, go ahead in their lives, do their exams, right? And, come to a logical conclusion to their secondary school education. But again, there are the parents who are afraid to send their children to school because, of course, every day more and more information we get about, the effects of COVID, and that COVID is actually, is very real and is, the effects are, out there. Then again, we have the schools themselves who are also very, worried about carrying on that responsibility of keeping such a huge number of people safe. So the teachers, the children, that's the students themselves, even their parents, to a large extent, keeping them safe. So there's a lot of varying perspectives about that. But I think personally that safety should come first. It's not good news. We're not jumping, we're not excited and dancing, right? But I think under the circumstances, safety of the students must be considered first, because really and truly, it's a child that is alive that would write an exam and then be alive to continue to use, whatever results of the exam, right? So that's my perspective. I think that we're not happy about it, but, it might be the safest thing to do at this point.
Now, part of the concerns is that having made that announcement, I mean, the minister, the recent announcement that, well, he feels it's not safe. There are those who feel that, wait a minute, what considerations, what did they find that made him come up with that decision? Because from what we heard of him in that report while he was speaking to journalists was that while the conversation was going on with some stakeholders, why I announced this, and then he appeared and said, no, okay, well, we won't go back. Let's see who you will sit with. That appears to be the dominant thinking. It could be wrong, but that's the way it comes across. So are you satisfied or equally concerned that they have identified the gaps with which this latest decision was predicated on?
Well, the truth is, I have a lot of trust in our government to a certain degree. And I know that, a lot of conversation, a lot of discussions, dialogue have been taking place concerning this particular, situation, the decision. Because again, to run to run a WAEC exam in Nigeria it takes a lot. It takes a lot. So it's not an online exam, right? So people are going to have to aggregate in particular places all over Lagos, Nigeria, and they would have to sit. So there are a lot of logistics, logistical considerations for that. There's so much. There's really so much. So I think that it was, a decision that they came to after really understanding, going further to understand what it takes to actually, hold that exam. And I think that, again, like I said, many children are in boarding house. So many of the children that are going to write the WAEC will probably have to go back to the boarding houses. How does that work? Are those schools ready? Are they safe? Are they, those safety measures, have they been put in place? Have there been so much to consider? Even if the children are in
Speaking of
school,
things to consider,
then, the considerations of
Right. Speaking of things to consider, let me just put this in also because the minister said, well, it'd rather we skipped this whole academic year than to put the students in danger. And for a lot of people, they're saying, oh, what is the implication of skipping a whole academic year? Is there really an implication to that? I mean, what does that mean, really?
So you see, now the thing is, which is where that's the other side, really. When we skip a whole academic year, it then means that we are setting the children further behind, because we all understand the issues we have with quality, equity, and efficiency of education provision in Nigeria. So we are still playing catch up, as it were, to the rest of the world. So when our children are now having to stay at home for a year, there's that. Then there's also the consideration of learning loss. There's also the consideration of the emotional effect that you have on the children, the psychological effect of just waking up every day and really having nothing to do, right? And so there's a lot of consideration that, there. But again, on the other side, we are thinking that safety, should come first. Safety should come first.
Yeah, but, sorry to jump in again, and that's why they're saying, for those who are still concerned, that if they had that meeting with stakeholders, as it were, such conversation should have come up and it should have been mentioned in that meeting wherein that announcement was made, to the extent that, do we have to lose an academic year? Because some vice chancellors and some other educationists that we picked their brain thought we could still resort to online learning. So they don't have to be physically present in schools, such that we miss 1 year.
Okay, so you see, we go back to the issue of equity, right? So, all right, fantastic. Online learning can take place, but is Nigeria equipped for online learning to take place across all the socioeconomic divides? So yes, online learning can take place. A lot of private, schools just went online quickly and didn't look back. But the children in the public schools, public universities, public secondary schools, public primary schools, and blah, blah, how are they learning, right? How are they learning? And then, in Lagos, for example, they resorted to the TV. Is it every child that has TV? Is it every child that has electricity? So the issue would then just be that.
Oh, dear. We appear to be losing you. I hope the system is not trying to tell us. You see what I'm saying? This is what I'm saying. But Dr. Abiodun, the part of that is that some of the VCs who also were on the program, when we put the question across to them, they thought that, yes, they can combine the online learning while some are still physically present. So what if we have that strategy or that system? Would it be out of place?
Okay, no, so that's what's called blended learning, right? Absolutely not out of place, right? Absolutely not out of place. But again, the question is, so if we're going to do that, are we equipped to do that? What measures is the government putting in place to ensure that, the children that are going to be, online in their remote areas are equipped, they have a laptop, they have data, right? And the connection is nice and free and clear. And then the children that come to school, what are we putting in place to ensure that, the safety all the way? So we are back to square one as well. How prepared are we? What exactly are we putting in place? I'll give you an example. So I have a family who lives in the United States, for example, and they go to a public school. And the school actually asked them to come and pick up one laptop each for their children in New York. So, okay, you don't have laptop, all those socioeconomic issues should not come into place. Just come and get the laptop. So what are we doing? We can't just sit and say, oh, yeah, you do that, you do that. What processes, what measures are we putting in place to ensure that it takes place? We can't pay mouth service, right? We can't just say, it's going to take place. And then half of the children are not learning. Half of the children don't show up. Half of the children are, so even in private schools, do you know the percentage of children who are able to show up consistently for their online classes, you'll be surprised. It's about 60%. And those are the good private schools that we all know and recognize.
Well, so, what would you say if we adjusted the school calendar? School calendar seems to run from, like, say, September till about, say, July, August of the following year. Do you think it is something we could consider? I know we are not the only country on our own calendar. We also have the same calendar with many other nations in different parts of the world. WAEC is an example, NECO and all of that, GSAT, and all those other questions, all those other examinations. Do you think it would be something that we could consider to shift the calendar year from September to another month, if a month further, since this is a global pandemic? Let the education community in the world come together, adjust that so that we can begin, so to speak, a whole new different academic calendar. After all, we change our education systems from one to another, 6-3-3-4, and all of that. So do you think that is something that could be considered?
Fantastic. So I like what I had a ready answer for you, but then you answered it when you said that it needs the collective agreement and effort and collaboration of the nations, right? Because if we in Nigeria just decide, oh, okay, guess what, guys? We're all going to just start school in December or January, and then the rest of the world, it remains, how do we integrate? So that is possible, totally possible, right? But is there that forum where the nations of the world agree to say, okay, you know what? Can we focus on safety? Can we focus on people just trying to keep alive? And then move this calendar to, for example, January, and say, okay, you know what? Because I mean, when I was growing up, it was January to December. People came together and said, change it to September to June. So these people can as well come together and say, okay, because of the pandemic, I mean, one thing always leads to another. So because of the global pandemic, we are then moving it back to, for example, January to December. But again, that needs a collective, that needs a unified approach and decision.
All right, so I guess we'll now wait for the ministers and the PTF to, let's see, the thinking such that the others can latch onto it. But we do thank you, Dr. Abimbola Ogundere, an educationist.